Engine out on takeoff is one of the biggest killers of general aviation pilots. We're going to talk to somebody who not only survived, he thrived in the hangar. Hello and welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Dan Milliken and my co-pilot.
I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by Colton Mortgage and Flying Eyes Optics, who somehow make you look cool.
Yeah, Christy's mad. Co-pilot apparently is a term you're not supposed to use, so sorry.
It's pilot monitoring and pilot flying, or captain and first officer.
Okay, we won't make that mistake anymore. So I'm excited about this episode because it's a fellow 210 pilot. And you may not know, I fly a 210.
This is brand new information.
Yeah, Lola, and I fly her when she's not in for maintenance.
This is facts.
Which is every now and then. And one of the scariest things for me as I'm taking off, big powerful engine, love the engine, but what would happen if the engine quit on takeoff, such a critical area of flight?
I mean, this is a question or a topic that affects pilots of any airplane. I mean, I've seen it happen in other airplanes, not to myself, but you hear stories. And we have somebody here today with just such a story. He had an engine failure on takeoff, and he happened to have a camera rolling when it happened.
Always good to have the cameras rolling. Ed, Frye, Ed, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dan.
We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So you had an engine out. So take us back from the beginning and tell us about the plane, how you got into flying, and let's set the backstory for the event.
All right, so I've been flying since about 2017, and I've been flying out of that Tracy Airport for the whole time.
So very familiar with the airport.
Very familiar with the airport, the layout, and all of the surrounding area. I bought my plane in 2000, and I put about 160 hours on it during that time. But back last February, the engine, the maintenance technicians and such found a fair amount of ferrous metal in the engine. So we took it down for maintenance, changed the lifters and that sort of thing. And then we found more metal after that maintenance. So we took the whole engine down and split the case, put it together, replaced all of the bad parts, flushed it all out. And this was supposed to be the maiden voyage after the engine out.
Oh no, so it was one of those stereotypical first flights out of maintenance.
Absolutely.
Oh man.
Well, in some regards, that's when you're probably at your highest level of alert.
Yes, yeah. And that, if you watch my video, there's some reasons I fumble on a couple of different things because I was so focused on that engine. Mm-hmm. And what might happen and what actually did happen. So that was where I was high alert, was paying attention to that.
All right, so take us through that particular flight.
All right, so it started off, we had just pulled it out. We'd run it a few times or several times. I've got the engine monitoring system over there. Wanted to make sure that everything was good. Also wanted to make sure that I didn't overheat the engine before I got in the air. So I taxi away from the fuel pumps and do my run up, and I'm thinking in my head, okay, here's my plan. This is the emergency briefing that I always give when I take off from this airport is, okay, if anything happens while I'm rolling down the runway, I'm gonna reduce power, stop before the end of the runway. If I lift off and there's runway left, then I'll reduce power, settle back down the runway, and stop, hopefully.
Right.
If there's no runway left and I'm below the crosswind turn, I'm going to make a 30-degree left turn and follow a railroad tracks because the housing development, you fly a 210, it goes fast.
Right.
And it doesn't climb real fast.
Right, so you're downrange pretty quick.
Yeah. So there is a left turn, and if I'm at pattern altitude, I'm coming back to the airport because I'm going to stay in the airport vicinity. I might not make the runway, but I'm coming back to the field.
Yeah, that's pretty smart.
And I was planning on staying in the pattern for this. So because it was the maiden flight, I was going to plan on flying for about an hour or 90 minutes at, 2,000 feet right above the field and just full
Working.
manifold power, 30 inches of manifold and 2,600 RPM, and just whole butt around the pattern all day.
Right. At what altitude? Okay, take us through. You take off, so everything's good. Walk us through.
So as I take off, I apply full manifold pressure, 35 and a half inches or 36 inches, and I start to roll. Well, first off, I put in 20 degrees of flap. So I have the...
Oh, really?
Yes. I have the Robertson Stoll kit.
Okay.
And so that SDC has drooped ailerons, and for the VX, it says 20 degrees of flap. So I always take off with, using the Stoll kit.
Yeah. So in my 210, it's 1 notch of flaps, 10
Right.
degrees. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can get off in less than 1,000 feet.
Wow.
And generally, I'll pull the gear up, as I cross Delta, because that's 2,000 feet. I've chewed up half the runway already, and I'm already at 50 feet. So I've got positive rate, gear up, I'm taking off. But before that, as I roll through, I feel a little surge, but then it comes back to full power. I thought maybe that's the prop governor cycling or something like that. But I start rolling, I take off, pull the gear up, and I'm getting ready to make my left turn. And you can see in some of the video, I turn to the left like this to clear for traffic. And then all of a sudden, boom, and the whole thing starts shaking.
So just like that, did it look like you were pulling the power back?
I was.
Okay.
Full power, I was getting up to, 200-300 feet, and I back off just slightly, and you don't see that, but I pull it down to 30 inches. So top of the green, the 85% power. And then I started to adjust, I meant to adjust the propeller to bring it down off of the red line. I wanted to be at 2,500 RPM. And I grabbed a mixture and I bring it back, and I cut the fuel back about half a gallon an hour or something like that. Not too much.
Not significant. Yeah.
No.
Well, let me ask you this real quick and interrupt. Do you have the IO 520?
Yes.
A TS, is it turbo?
Yes.
Okay, so the TSIO 520. So on that one, you get 310 horse on takeoff, but you can only run that for 5 minutes. So
Correct.
As pilots of 210s, it's normal for us, after we've taken off within the first few minutes, to go ahead and power back off that 36.5 manifold pressure.
Right.
So that's all normal.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I adjust the mixture. It takes a few seconds, and then I went, nope, that's the wrong knob. And then I bring it down to 2,600 RPM, which is the top of the green. Mm-hmm. And I just get it to 2,600, and I go to turn, and it popped.
Just bam.
Yeah. And I look at the yoke, or look at the MFD, PFD, and I just go for the turn. And I pull back real hard, or pull down real hard, which also pulled the yoke back. And I went, nope, I need to go down.
Right.
As soon as,
Because that could have been a bad stall at that point.
right, absolutely. It's interesting because when that engine let go, the thing that happened, flashed in my head, this is how I die.
Really?
Yes. And then the next thing that popped in my head was left.
Okay.
So,
And what altitude were you at?
so via the GPS track and everything, I was at 371 feet AGL.
Oh my, that is
Okay.
not high.
Yeah, that's.
And I climbed, and that I continued to climb for another 25 feet. So
Okay.
I made it to 400 feet.
Okay, but
Okay.
that's still below the 700 feet for going back in the impossible turn.
Yeah, and the impossible turn is such a controversial thing,
Right.
and I try to. I've been on the side of things, the school of saying, don't attempt it.
Yeah,
But he had something going for him.
What was that?
You had a perpendicular runway.
I did.
Okay,
I did. There was
so it's not a 230 degree turn that you had to do. Which a lot of people in impossible.
It was a
turn.
230 degree turn, but I didn't have to do the 100, 230, and then another 40 back to the to the
Okay.
reciprocal. There was a gentleman who reached out to me afterwards and did a full analysis on all of these what ifs.
Right.
And I would not have made the reciprocal runway.
Right. That was pretty low. Yeah.
But I get into the turn and I look out the window and I'm just thinking left, and I didn't quite make it to the road and the railroad tracks that I wanted. And I look out and hey, there's the numbers right there.
Okay.
And this geometry just looks perfect.
Okay.
And so I see the numbers and I put the gear down. And then as I come back over here, like, and you can see in the video, I fumble.
Right.
It's gross motor skills. I'm like trying to grab it. And then I come back across and I notice I'm getting slow again. You know, the doors open up and it goes real slow. And you can see it on my face. I just like push the nose over again real hard. But I maintain that turn. Push the nose over, and then I'm thinking like, okay, the wing is down. I can't see the airport anymore. I'm a big guy, so I'm up in the wing, and I'm looking. I'm like, okay, what are my options? Okay, there's a big green field right there, right outside the airport environment, right next to the canal. I'm like, that looks like I could make it, and I'm looking over here, and it's coming around, and then I see the runway come back in. I'm like, that looks even better. I'm gonna go for the field. And as I continue to come around, I see that runway end identifier light just sitting there flashing, and I'm like, that's gonna hurt, because I'm coming right over the top of it, and I'm like, this is gonna hurt. And I got in the ground effect right there, and just as I came over the fence, the engine locked up. The propeller, so it was windmilling the whole time until I come over the top of the fence, and then it comes into a hard lock. And it felt like I actually gained a little bit of energy when it stopped spinning.
Oh, really? I would have thought the opposite. It would create more drag, but maybe not.
No, apparently the spinning disc creates more drag than a stopped propeller.
That's interesting. We'll have to have you guys out there if you've got an opinion on a spinning prop provides more drag or a stopped one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It felt that way. It might have just been something, but it was very interesting there. And that gave me enough energy to go all the way down, and I touched down middle of the first stripe, so about 400 feet down the runway. And I coasted all the way down to the end of the runway and taxied off. Didn't quite make it past the hold short line, but I made it all the way off the runway.
All right, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, is it towered field,
No.
controlled field? Okay, uncontrolled field with 2 runways. That's amazing. So, what would you say about dropping the gear? Do you feel good that you dropped it that early, or do you wish you had waited? Or I guess it didn't wish you'd waited because you made it just fine. But where do you land on the gear issue?
Pun intended.
Yeah.
So the gear is an interesting thing. I don't recall making that decision.
So you just went gear down out of instinct.
Yeah, here's the numbers. I'm abeam the numbers. That's where I put the gear down and the flaps down.
Interesting.
So it's
Primacy.
Yeah.
Primacy is a real thing.
It is, and the Stoll STC probably helped immensely in this situation.
It certainly helped with keeping me from stalling and stuff. The Stoll wing, if I take it up and go into slow flight, I've attempted this, it will do 45 knots and it won't break.
Wow. Yeah, mine's at 55.
Those are almost warrior speeds.
Almost, yeah, that's your cruising speed, isn't it?
No, actually.
Okay. All right.
So in that configuration, I almost fly at like a 172. You know, it's when it's clean, I'll fly. I won't go much slower than 90. But in that configuration, you know, I'll slow down to 80 on the downwind, and then 75, and then 65, and over the fence at 50.
Yeah, you're much slower than I am. A question I've wanted to ask you, this is probably the most important question for me. What's the difference between practicing a power off 180 or a power off, practicing an engine out versus the performance of the plane in a real engine out?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Probably height. He was only 300 and something feet, 400
Well, I guess
feet.
my question is, I thought about, like, as I'm practicing, a power off 180, is my plane like gliding better than it
Right.
would if the engine was out? So I've thought, if I have an engine out and I'm going to come in, do I need to come in higher, and plan for more of a drop, or I don't know. That's why I wanted to find out from you what the difference was. But you were so low, maybe it's hard to answer that.
Well, and I think wind speeds and stuff take a lot of, there's just so many variables.
There are.
You
And-
know?
Yeah, and you are now on a crosswind runway at this point.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I hadn't done a lot of power off 180s in the 210.
You do now, don't you?
I will be, yes, that's for sure. After the break-in period, of course, because you're not supposed to do touch and goes and that
No.
sort of thing. I was performing power off 180s just 4 days earlier in a 172.
Ah, okay.
That's interesting.
And with your stow kit, you're almost performing like a 172.
Yes.
So, okay, that all just came into play to help you.
I want to know what they found. Like, why did this happen? What did they find?
It's an interesting story. There was a maintenance issue on the disassembly, reassembly.
So human error.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
Okay.
The lawyers are
I actually have,
Got it.
I actually have a video that's coming out that's going to explain that. But it seems one of the circlips got disturbed on the counterweight on the crankshaft. So what they think happened is the counterweight came loose and started bouncing around inside the engine.
That does not sound like it's a good thing.
No.
Okay.
What are your major takeaways from this event that you can share to, other pilots and student pilots out there?
Always be prepared for the engine to let go, and practice that primacy, and brief your emergency abort procedure when you're taking off. What happens when you take off? Because have that plan. Like for me, like I said, if anything happens rolling down the runway, stop before the end. Take off. This is my abort. This is how I'm going to do this. Brief it. I'd brief that 240 times. I'm going to turn left and follow the railroad tracks unless I'm at 600 feet AGL or MSL, and then I'm going to come back to the crossrun runway.
So that left turn primacy was because you've been briefing to the railroad tracks, not left turn 180. It was a left turn for the railroad tracks, and that's what you did.
Yeah. And I also thought I was higher than I was.
Interesting.
So it was left, and as soon as I turn left, there's the runway. I'm going for the runway. And I actually saw somebody else do this exact thing at that airport. Take off runway 30, land runway 08.
For
Because
practice?
no.
Oh, man, there's something about that airport.
Before your engine out?
Yeah, about a month prior.
I'm sorry,
So
where
you're
is
like,
this
hold my
airport?"
beer. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and
But with that, you asked on purpose. Now that I've had my engine out, and it was on YouTube, all of the instructors at the school are teaching or saying, what would you do? How would you handle this?
See, that's great.
And pulling power at 500 feet.
That's good. That's a good takeaway. It was a great outcome, honestly. Great job.
Thank you.
the other thing that I take away is that you were very much aware of your speed, and you kept pushing that nose down.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of the most important things.
I noticed in the video, because I noticed that he kind of pitched up a little bit and went, nope, nope, nope. And literally you could see the airplane go like this.
Yep. Well, kudos. Good job for that.
Yeah, this is an amazing story, and one that I think we can all learn from.
Absolutely. And that's part of why I put it up there, and I'm leaving it alone as far as that.
So last question, would you recommend people do the turn back to the runway? Under 500?
As a general rule, no. As as an aspiring flight instructor, no. As a seasoned pilot with, a few hundred hours where the airplane, you know how it performs, that's going to entirely depend on the environment and the conditions. It's a dynamic environment. It's always changing.
It's going to be a dynamic, always changing decision.
Yes.
Good answer. All right, Ed, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, you guys, if you have an opinion about the impossible turn or just turning back to a runway, please leave your comments below. We appreciate everybody's support. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.